We are privileged to have Dr. Naresh Kumar Watts from Department of English, University School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, Dwarka, New Delhi, India, to be with us. Yesterday, he has delivered a very inspiring, informative talk, and today we request him to kindly chair this session. Dr. Naresh Kumar Watts, kindly please. May I now request Dr. Hussein Hamid Mayuf, Instructor and Coordinator, College of Education for Human Sciences, University of Babylon, Iraq, to kindly present his paper. Dr. Hussein Hamid Mayuf Nav. Sir, welcome please.
This is me, Assistant Prof. Dr. Hussein Hamid Mayouf from University of Babylon, Iraq. My paper is entitled Qualitative Meaning as a Source of Difficulty in Translation of the Glorious Quran. Let me start with giving you an idea about this topic. This paper actually discusses areas of difficulty related to qualitative meaning by choosing 3 translations of 7 Quranic texts. Actually, these translations include Maulai Shakir Ali, Khan and Shakir Ali, sorry, in 1938, Khan and Al-Hilali in 1999, and Itani 2012. These translations are to be compared and analyzed to identify the sources of difficulty in the translation process. Actually, this paper tries to emphasize one source of difficulty, which is how to avoid a semantic or the semantic loss through transferring the exact connotative meaning of the source text word as possible. One reason for this difficulty is the lack of the semantic and cultural equivalence, while the other reason is the failure of the translator to find the most suitable equivalence. The sources of difficulty in rendering the connotation of source language text also include semantic loss due to difference in semantic scope between the source text word and the target text word, or as a result for the difference in the type of connotation that each of the source text and the target text words have. This paper presents the variation in translation or in translating the same text as an evidence for difficulty encountered due to the connotative meaning that the source text has. All right. Now, uh, actually, there is an increased need for translated Quran as a result for many factors, which have their effects on Islam and Muslims. Among these factors is the Muslim communities in non-Muslim countries, in addition to consequences of 7 September attacks, extremist Islamic groups. All these factors present a misleading about Islam and Muslims. This raises actually many questions, like, is Islam a religion of heartedness and war? Do all Muslims, or are all Muslims terrorists, and the like? To answer the many questions of that nature that one that needs, that actually seeks an answer about the nature of Islam. A great movement was led to go through the most sacred text of Islam, which is the Holy Quran, or the Glorious Quran, as some people prefer. Translating Quran actually is considered as a hard labor duty, since doing this task means dealing with a unique discourse that portrays one of the most spreading religions in the world spiritual system. Confronted with this idea, the translator will face many areas of and one evidence for the difficulty is the wide scope of variation in translation of the Quran, as Mahasna in 2016 referred to uh, this type of variation, which uh, she ascribed to Quran limits of translatability. One of the difficult one of the actually difficult areas that the translator encounters during translation of Quran is the qualitative meaning, which is one of the most important types of meaning, since it is, according to Leach, in 1983, is the wider and far more comprehensive than many other types of meaning because every aspect of the word meaning can be part of its qualitative meaning. Leach again in 1983 also adds that qualitative meaning is the communicative value that makes the expression go beyond its conceptual meaning, while Newmark in 1981 gives qualitative meaning another dimensions or another dimension, as it is the meaning that can be revealed within the receiver of the encoded meaning. Uh, Looking at qualitative meaning from a different uh, angle, we can say that it is a hard task to be handled through translation because of differences between language and expressing the connotations and associations of that. In this domain, Kohler in 1979 actually identified two types of connotations. Those that are related to language used by specific groups of people and those related to styles of language, such as archaic, pompous, plain, or script. Abdul Ali in 2018 from his side discusses the sources of difficulty in dealing with connectivity. One of these challenges is the complex nature of connotations, which makes it different to tackle the name. Uh, Talking or taking one of the examples, one of the famous examples, and the most important examples is the name of Allah Almighty. Allah is a good example for those Quranic names that is difficult to be rendered with. Preserving its connotations by merely substitute it with the word English word alternative, which is God. Even the word Allah, for example, has certain impact, certain emphasis. Even the pronunciation of the sounds is different. Yeah. And it is actually um, it is unique in pronunciation. There is no word in Arabic that starts with the sound combination of al, ah. Search for a word that matches this pronunciation. You will never find in the language. Or you cannot even derive uh, uh, other words uh, uh, to be equivalent for this Quranic uh, word. Now, uh, talking about some examples, uh, let's talk about the first example in the Quranic text taken from Al-Tur Surah ayah or verse 20. متكئين على سرر مصفوفة وزوجناهم بحور عين. Itani uses and we will couple them with gorgeous poses. Khan and Al-Hilali uh, uh, translated this verse into and we shall marry them with female fair ones. with wide, lovely eyes. While Ali, Shaka Ali, uses, and we shall consort them with fair maidens having wide, beautiful eyes. That is the connected meaning. Connected meaning actually makes difficult for those three famous translators of the glorious Quran. So they didn't use the same uh, words or terms to give al-hur al-ain, for example, or surah al-masfufatin. Uh, they use different terms because there is difficulty in matching or finding equivalent terms, expressions in the target or language. Another example from Al-Takwir Surah, ayah or verse 17. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا عَسَعَسَ. The Thani uses and by the night as it recedes. While Khan uses and by the night as it departs. That's recedes, here departs. While Ali or Shaka Ali uses and I call to witness the night as it passes away. He uses passes away. And we can find actually many examples um, which is which makes uh, the difficulty clear in translating these types of meaning, namely uh, the connotative meaning. We've seen that in the first example, the word hur, which means a white woman that its whiteness shines out of her clothes and her skin reflects picture of her face as an indication of her skin purity. Therefore, the different equivalents in translations provided by Khani, Tani, and Molawi suggests another connotation other than that was provided by Al-Qurtubi, for example. Al-Qurtubi said that Hawr is a plural of Hawra, which means, as we have said, uh, the white skin woman. The second example also we talked about As'asa. The word As'asa in the second example represents a great challenge to be translated faithfully. Al-Taba'i, for example, indicates that the word As'asa, which is derived from the infinitival form As'asa, which refers to the falling and the passing of the night. It also indicates some minor connotations according to Al-Taba'i, which is the tenderness of darkness at the two ends of the night. As it is observed that used words such as recedes, departs, and passes away. They never approach any of the as'asa since they only suggest expiration meaning. And this goes to other examples. The study concludes the following. And it um, comes out with the idea that translating connotative meaning of the source text is something problematic that cannot be compiled without any reference to the culture or any other tool that is related to the culture of the source language or the translated text. This may be due to the different attitudes and feelings that related that are related to certain terms within the community of the source language. And translating Quran is something difficult and hard to be rendered. One reason for this difficulty is the different styles and linguistic devices to achieve meaning that cannot be expressed with the direct language. Thank you very much. See you next time.
May now request Dr. Sana Muhammad Mahdi, Assistant Professor, College of Arts, Al Mustansiriya University, Baghdad, Iraq, to kindly present her paper. Madam Dr. Sana Muhammad Mahdi, welcome please.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I feel a pleasure to participate in this conference. My topic will be on the illusion of an ideal husband in Oscar Wilde's play, An Ideal Husband. The Victorian home has always been looked to be the ideal image of family life that dominated by a father, his submissive wife, and the children. The stereotype can be misleading and deceiving since it is much fictitious than real, as the most Victorian homes seem to be harmonious from the outside, unlike the inside, they look shameless. In reality, the home can be considered as a physical structure and emotional state of mind as well, through reading many 19th century works. One notices the concentration on the importance of harmonies, the family life. Most people consider the home as a refuge, a place where they can get rid the burdens and the pressures of public life. In fact, they should separate them between their public life and the private one. In case their public life interferes with their private one, the home is completely ruined and left in mess. This interference has been threatening the steadiness of most homes for centuries. Many writers in the 19th century were aware of the Victorian home hypocrisy. Oscar Wilde was one of them who challenged the society in most of his works by presenting a happy home that is slowly rusted because of the society's evils. We concentrate upon the main topic of this play, that over expectations of an ideal husband. Oscar Wilde, 1854-1900, an Irish playwright, concentrated on exposing the obscure facets of the Victorian time. In his play, An Ideal Husband, which is written in 1893, Wilde seeks to keep the home unified by breaking all the evil cycle. Thus, he presents no evil, powerful woman, meaning a woman that can easily overcome her evil acts. It is a social satire of London society in the mid-18th and condemns the value of Victorian society that cruelly hypertextual. This play was written in the late 19th century, in which Wilde used faculty characters to refer to the irony of the play's title. The play begins at Sir Robert's house in London, where his wife, Lady Chiltern, welcomes the guests. Through this event, Wilde portrays a house party in order to reveal the English high-class society. Wilde uses vulnerable characters in order to attack and satirize their defects. He presents characters whose family lives are of many problems due to their past secrets. The most important event in the play is when Mrs. Cheverly, Lady Chiltern's old friend, begins to blackmail Sir Robert Chiltern as she knows that he sells a state secret for the sake of money. She threatens to expose his past secret behind his success on corruption and lies if he does not support her scheme of building a canal in Argentina. If she does so, she will destroy not only his reputation in society, but his marriage as well, because his wife believes that he is a faultless man. By knowing the bitter truth about her husband's past, she feels that her world breaks down suddenly. It is ironic, since she is responsible of destroying both their lives when she thinks he is an ideal man. For that, she makes him unable to tell her the shame of his past. Victorian woman has over expectation of a perfect husband. Thus, this play does not mock her belief on following her happiness in marriage. On the contrary, it makes her her understand what marital happiness means to the husband. It is obvious that the lack of communication and frankness between Sir Chiltern and his wife has created a gap between them. Thus, the ideal marriage is shattered by the secrets of the past. Walt comments that every person in this world has a defect, no matter it is simple thing, with idealistic view of moral imperfections. Therefore, though the development of the imperfect characters, through the development of the imperfect characters, Wilde shows that love endures and triumphs all imperfections. Wilde concentrates that conflict, the past, and the imperfection are considered dark, so the only light is the triumph of love that provides hope. Love can help enlighten any problem through forgiveness. Therefore, Wilde makes them reconcile at the end of the play. Wilde seeks to make the end of the play happily in order to keep the family unified, even after the secret is exposed. Here he concentrates upon the concept of tolerance between the family members, especially the wife and the husband, to avoid collapsing the family and the home. As a matter of fact, no one in this world without mistakes. The important thing is to never repeat such mistakes once again. The conclusion, Wilde gives hope to the Victorian people and makes them believe that any home problem can be solved and no need to destroy the family. Despite of giving hope, he emphasizes that the home in Victorian times is never unified as it is appeared. He emphasizes that believing in finding or having an ideal husband is impossible, since each human being has his own past, secrets, mistakes, or even shameful acts. Thus, trying to find an ideal husband is useless. In the world and through all the times, there is no ideal person, neither ideal husband nor ideal wife. If you have any questions, I'm ready, please, to answer. And thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
May I now request Dr. Manal Met Abdul Hadi, Instructor, College of Arts, Al Mustansiriya University, Baghdad, Iraq, to kindly present her paper. Now, Dr. Manal, please.
A great opportunity for me to be a participant in this virtual conference. But before indulging into my paper, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Manal Na'mat Abdel Hadi. I am an instructor of English language at the Department of English Language and Literature in the College of Arts, Mustansiriya University. I am from Baghdad, Iraq. The paper I'm going to discuss or present in this conference is entitled by a discourse analysis of Saki's The Open Window. In the coming slide here in the abstract, the purpose or the aim of the paper, in addition to the objective and methodologies, are all mentioned in the abstract. So the main aim of the present paper is to analyze and study the a short story, The Open Window, written by Saki, in terms of discourse analysis methodologies. The model adopted in this study follows Bugrant and Dressler 1981 framework of textuality, which has attempted to discuss a text in terms of 7 standards of textuality, namely cohesion, coherence, intentionality, acceptability, informativity, situationality, and intertextuality. As far as the objectives of the study is to specify the discourse elements that make the short story a discourse, and to find out which of the 7 standards has been used thoroughly in this text. Actually, this kind of study is as a descriptive qualitative analysis in which the researchers adopt the observation method by employing the techniques of reading, noting, and selecting. And as far as the results, it has been reached that all types of cohesion, reference, substitution, ellipsis, conjunction, and lexical cohesion are all used in this text so as to make it coherent. This is, of course, in addition to all the other standards of textuality which has been used in this text that make it a discourse. Now, before indulging into the process of analysis, let us have a brief idea about what is meant by discourse analysis. In fact, discourse analysis has been discussed thoroughly by a number of researchers and scholars, including Portridge, which has mentioned that discourse analysis is mainly interested with studying what lies behind the language, the word, the clause, and even the sentences. In other words, it attempts to study the relationship that exists between language and the cultural context in which it is used. After this, we shed light also on the Bugrant and Dressler model, which has been adopted in this study, starting with the 7 standards of textuality. These standards are actually mentioned in the same order as they are found in this model. So starting with a cohesion, it seems that it is the surface component in which each component depends upon each other according to certain grammatical forms and conventions, okay, or what is called grammatical dependencies, in which in this concern we are looking for certain conventions or certain connectors that exist within the text that tie the text together and make it coherent. Now, as far as coherence, which is the second standard, it is in Bugrant and Dressler's model. It is the main component of any form of textual study, because if a text is not fully understood, a good text was not produced. And it is the aim and task of text linguistic research to try to determine what makes one text acceptable and another one is unacceptable. Intentionality, it concerns the text producer's attitude that the set of occurrences should constitute a cohesive and coherent text, instrumental in fulfilling the producer's intentions, as for instance to distribute knowledge or to attain certain goals specified in certain plans. So intentionality, it reflects the attitude of the producer rather than the attitude of the receiver, which is shown in the coming factor, which is acceptability. It is the fourth standard, which is concerned with the text receiver's attitude that the set of occurrences should constitute a cohesive and coherent text, having some use or relevance for this receiver, for instance, to acquire knowledge or to produce cooperation in certain a plan. Okay, now we come to informativity. It is the fifth standard, and it is interested in the extent to which the occurrence of the presented text are expected versus unexpected, or non-informativity broadly has to do with the way in which parts of the text have communicative value. This is the main idea of informativity, is to find out whether certain text has to do with, or it has certain communicative value. As far as situationality, it also it concerns with the factors which make a text relevant to a certain situation of occurrence. Therefore, it focuses on the role played by the context of situation in any communicative event. And finally, we come to intertextuality, which is the seventh criterion. It focuses upon the factors which relate the utilization of one text to the knowledge of one or more previously encountered text. This is as far as the main or the seven standards of textuality. Now we come to the problem of our study. In fact, the researchers in this study conduct a discourse analysis of the text under investigation by examining or investigating the seven standards of textuality. And it should be noted that this text has not received a linguistic analysis in terms of textuality. Therefore, I can claim that this study is the first of its kind in this concern. As far as the objectives, as I have mentioned earlier in the abstract, but no matter, I will repeat it also here in this subsection. The current study seeks to outline the elements of texture that constitute a discourse unity in Saki's short story, The Open Window. As far as the hypothesis, two questions are aimed to be answered in this analysis. Question number one: what are the elements of textuality that make the text a discourse? And two, which of the seven standards are the frequently used ones that frame the discourse of the story? The methodology adopted in this analysis, as is also mentioned earlier, follow the model adopted in this study is that of Bjorkgren and Dressler, 1981, of discourse analysis. The text under investigation has been analyzed in terms of counting the numbers or counting these sentences by numbering them for the sake of easiness. And each sentence in the story is investigated in terms of the cohesive relations that link it with the other ties and other sentences. Now we come to conclusion. As you know, since we are enclosed by a certain limitation of time, therefore I skip the analysis from this presentation. Therefore, I come directly to the conclusion. So based on the findings of the analysis, it becomes apparent that the seven standards of textuality are all grouped together to form the discourse of the short story, and all the criteria of textuality that make up a discourse are present in the text. And this is actually answer to the question raised by the researchers. The short story is realized by 69 sentences comprising of 185 cohesive ties. This number of grammatical and lexical cohesive ties can tell us that the ratio of the text links to its sentences is 268 percent. This high percentage of occurrence of the cohesive features is due to the frequent use of reference and reiteration, which involves the repetition of certain lexical items and the occurrence of of a synonym of some kind. These relations are repeated and emphasized through the story in order to highlight the main themes of the text. All the sentences making up the story contain at least one cohesive tie connecting them with the previous sentences. That's to say, each sentence exhibits at least one type of cohesion with a preceding one. We can say that the short story, The Open Window, is a well-organized text which can be studied and discussed through text linguistic criteria. And finally, I have also listed the references that I have consulted throughout this paper. Many, many sources have been read and consulted in this paper. Um, uh, Thank you for listening, and I hope that my paper will give you a good idea about, or will inspire you for further research and for further analysis as far as discourse analysis, especially concerning the 7 standards of textuality of Grant and Dressler. Thank you very much, and I am really interested in this participation.
May I now request Dr. Jainib Abdul Qadim Salman Al Shahmari, College of Arts, Al Mustansiriya University, Baghdad, Iraq, to kindly present her paper, please. Madam Dr. Jainab, kindly, please.
Hello, I am Zainab Abdul Kalam Salman Al-Shammari. I am glad to have participated in this conference. My presentation is a very brief summary of all main points of the 13th page that highlighted and explained my purpose. My topic title is Caring for the Angel in the House Towards a Gendered Reading of Victorian Women's Fiction. Starting from the assumption that a 19th century British novel is a form of narrative that has as two of its essential ingredients the fictionality and the construction of a narrator that tells the story that is narrated. Our contribution analyzes the evaluation of Victorian women's fiction as the production of a number of women writers aware of their feminine nature and who are concerned with exploring the female universe in their literary production, offering the reader a presentation of the difference that highlights the cultural construction of women in the 19th century. The central metaphor of the woman as the angel in the house, as defined by Virginia Woolf, we oppose the new woman and the movement towards the woman's liberation and a new model of femininity which resulted in a narrative of the difference, the female masculinity, which allows for an overview of significant representatives of the gender. Mary Wollstonecraft, Emily Bronte, Elizabeth Bennet, Ellen Wood, Mary Elizabeth Braddon. These are manifestations of a confrontation of the moral code and dominant behavior in force throughout the 19th century in England. Historical evidence of the individuality and personal capacity of a collective marginalized by the dominant state and relegated to the margins of history. In fact, the the 21st century, narratology generally starts from the assumption that narrative is everywhere since it is the way of thinking and existing of the human being, and therefore considers that any suitable approach to its study happens to be necessarily interdisciplinary. Also, critics today generally agree that any text lacks an independent meaning. We can refer here to the work of Julia Kristeva, The Concept of Intertextuality, and Mikhail Bakhtin, The Concept of Dialogism, as thinkers who have marked a before and after in the critical consideration of the narrative and the literary text in general. That is, the meaning of a text is found not so much in the text itself, but rather in the relationships that can be established between the text and all those to which it refers or with which it can be related, so that it depends on a network of textual relationships. The intertextuality of every text point to its inevitably plural, reversible nature and open to the presuppositions of the reader himself. The texts, finally, lack clear limits and in one way or another are involved in the expression or repression of the different dialogical voices that exist in society at any given time. The local status of women in 19th century England greatly separates a single woman from married women to the clear determinant of the later. In spite of the fact that a single woman of legal age has no right to vote and she cannot exercise any official functions or practice a liberal profession and enjoy the same rights as men with regard to personal property or real estate and be able to freely dispose of them in life or by will. On the contrary, a married woman becomes a slave before marriage in all matters pertaining to her property, her children, and her very person until 1884. The husband has a right over the woman's person following the doctrine of common law. Marriage makes the husband the owner of all the woman's property, in exchange for which she is obligated to protect her, satisfy her needs, the state of the wife in terms of the rights of the children, and the marriage is also discriminatory for the woman. Discriminatory of the woman. A narrative of the different female masculinity. Female adolescence is a stage of the crisis since it constitutes a process of transformation from girl to woman in a society dominated by men. According to Halberstam, for boys it is a rite of passage to a higher position in terms of social power. In the case of girls, it's a lesson of containment, punishment, and repression. The tomboyism, which is associated with the desire of some girls for the greater possibilities of freedom and mobility of children, also reflects a certain desire for independence and personal fulfillment. At the time of adolescence, the instincts towards girls, tomboyism try to reform themselves towards forms of femininity appropriate to the concrete social model. In this sense, also feminine masculinity is suited as a field of fruitful research, if only because it's often interpreted as an even pathological signal of lack of identification of imbalance, since it points to the desire to be and to have a power that for girls it will always be out of reach. We have also women novelists and novels of women. The female novelistic production throughout this long 19th century is a good example for the argument presented so far. Thus, among the women novelists of this long period and beyond, the novelists of the time recognized as canonical: Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, Elizabeth, Driscoll, George Eliot, and Virginia Woolf, mainly, to name a few. Their start as professional writers represents a questioning of the particular proposals of the moment and points to their masculinity. Ironically, many of them adopted masculine pseudonyms since they are women with a profession in a society that relegates women to the domestic sphere only. The woman finds in this genre, still young in English letters, a suitable form of expression to explore her own universe among them, and for reason of space, we will highlight some cases in order to prove the argument established so far. Conclusion: histories of the difference. The novelist women represent a confrontation of the moral code and dominant behavior enforced throughout the 19th century in England. Its mere existence is historical evidence of the individuality and personal capacity of a collective marginalized by the dominant state and relegated to the margins of history. As a document of historical value, the novels that these women bore onto the patriarchy perspectives from the margins of the system that subvert and question a dominant ideology that tries to present itself as unequal and coherent. Furthermore, the Victorian novel, written by women, explores the possibility of alternative femininity that invades that terrain of masculinity and emerges as a more hybrid genre, exploring the possibility of a model of a masculine woman according to the current canons. Thank you so much. I am ready to any question. Thank you.
May I now request Mrs. Asil Hatim Jassam, Assistant Professor, College of Basic Education, Mustan Syria University, Iraq, to kindly present her paper. Madam, please.
International Conference on Language, Literature, Stylistics, and Translation Studies 2020 all over the world. This paper is carried out by me and my sister, Assistant Prof. Adil Hatib Jassam from Diana University. It's under the title John Irving's Problematic Version of Feminism in the World According to God. First of all, I'd like to explain one of the problems that do feminists face in feminist discourse, which is to arrive at a general agreement on what is meant by this term. Of course, they find much difficulty in defining this term, as well as defining the principles that feminists do believe in. As for the genesis of the term, it emerges as a response to gender inequality. As a movement, it aims at ending oppression and marginalization of women and promoting equality of women with men, as well as women's empowerment in all aspects of life. This paper concentrates on two different theories of feminism, namely liberal and radical feminism. Liberal feminism. The word liberal means freedom of choice. So liberal feminism as a movement is often connected to what is generally considered by feminists as the first wave feminism that began in the late 19th century up to the 20th century in the United States and Europe. As a movement, its main concern is gaining the right of women suffrage, that is to say, giving them the right to vote, as well as property rights, that is to say, the right to choose their own life and not to have their life chosen for them because of their sex, as well as they need and call for equality in accessing jobs and equal payment. In the novel, Jenny Fields, who is Garth's mother, is seen for a while as embodiment of positive or liberal feminism, in the sense that she decides to find a job for her and be independent. So she chooses to work as a nurse, and after giving birth to her son, which is seen as a protest against her family's intentions. Of course, her desire is to find a job and to be a working mother, and such a desire or situation was not very much common in the for the middle class women in the 1940s when the novel was set. For example, these situations were not common in the sense that women are expected to work as housewives no more. So therefore, such traditional sex roles or gender stereotypes are common in the 1940s when the novel was set, and it is highly perpetuated by the American society and criticized by the second wave feminist Betty Friedan in her book Feminine Mystique, which was published in 1963. For Betty Friedan, she considers this problem, the problem of traditional gender roles, as the problem that has no name. And in fact, for her, she thinks that it is dehumanizing and it prevents women from achieving any kind of development in all aspects of life. Jenny Field's rejection of the American perceived role of a wife. Of course, she rejects to fall into Jenny Fields rejects to fall into the category in this kind of life, and she decides to break free from the American perceived role of a wife. Therefore, she preaches women's rights over their own bodies, claiming that women, including herself, have the right to have children without men. So, to achieve this goal, she unconventionally conceives a child with a soldier who is a casualty of World War II. And he is brought to the hospital where she works as a result of the war, and she conceived this child who is named God. So she seems to be a very strong woman, and she is able to defend herself. The second wave feminism. This kind of feminism started in the late 1960s and continued to the early 1970s. Like liberal feminism, radical feminism attempts to identify and critically analyze women's oppression. And unlike liberal feminism, it focuses on or concentrates on women's general experience, whether public and private, and it works on the premises that the personal is the political. Here where lies the difference. Jenny Fields and the Ellen Jamesians. Of course, for Jenny Fields, all men are to be excluded, and she supports a group of women who are called the Ellen Jamesians. And all of them, in addition to this group, all of them, they consider men as violators or their enemy. So Jenny, with the establishment of her Center for Women in Dogs Head Harper becomes the spokesperson for women's movement, the basis of which lies somewhere between the huge responsibility for the people's lives and the ability to support even the craziest ideas when needed. So they are not against going to the extreme. So John Irving shows his negative perception of feminism through both Jenny Fields and the Ellen Jamesians, whom she supports. Jenny's intolerance of men and their sexuality or lust is shown as the novel opens with her attempts to defend herself against a soldier who tries to grope her in a movie theater, cutting his arm open with a knife. Now, what is Garth's view about this group and about his mother? The Ellen Jamesians, as Garth defines them, are an inflammatory political group of feminist extremists who voluntarily cut off their tongues in support of and to identify themselves with the 11-year raped victim named Ellen James. So, according to Garth, this act is looked at with skepticism, and he is also critical of this fanatical group in the sense that he thinks that it is meaningless to attempt self-mutilation just to serve their political cause. So they have used Ellen's personal tragedy to make their political agendas public. Here we have a very important idea that John Irving clearly manifests, which is the idea of how rape does affect language. Irving clearly manifests the effect of rape upon language through the characterization of both Ellen James and the Ellen Jamesians. In both cases, many critics view that sexual abuse either literally or figuratively robs the victims of language, which is the distinguished mark of humanity. However, after Garth and Ellen's private battle with the Ellen Jamesians' radical form of feminism, Ellen manages to shape her new identity and becomes a celebrated poet, regaining by that the voice which is forcefully taken from her in a new form. Here I come to the tragic ending of this novel. Of course, in this bizarre and absurd world of where the events were set, Jenny Fields is killed by the end by a violent anti-feminist who thinks that feminist movement has negatively affected his wife, who divorces him, and of course the life of her son, Garth, is also ended paradoxically by a fanatical feminist and a member of the Ellen Jamesians, who thinks that Garth is responsible for the death of her sister. Coming to the conclusion, no one can deny and to say that the world, according to Garth, has much to say about feminism, and it has affected the American cultural atmosphere and the feminist images both at the time of its publication, that is to say in 1978, up to the 1990s. Apparently, the novel supports the idea of feminism and feminist issues, but at the same time, it presents a problematic view of feminism by projecting argumentative negative stereotypes of feminists who are fanatically depicted. Now, even Jenny Fields, who on the surface embodies the positive view of feminism, a view that embraces her own individual right to make decisions about fundamentally the negative stereotype of the male-hating feminist. It does not continue on the same line. She moves from liberal feminist to become extremist in this regard. So, moved by their disgust and hatred of men, Fields and the self-mutilated Ellen Jamesians prove their ineffectuality to influence women's struggle for equality, or even be looked at as the agent of social change. In fact, their self-inflicted disfigurement is interpreted differently, and it is due to this that the novel remains open for debates among critics. Now, by this, I end The presentation
May I now request Dr. Anita Srivastava, Assistant Professor, Falah Ummat Girls PG College, Badodi, Uttar Pradesh, to kindly present her paper. Dr. Anita Srivastava, Madam, please.
Assistant Professor of Falah Ummat Girls PG College, Bhadohi, Varanasi, presenting the paper on Scout of Fictional Technique in Fasting Feasting, a novel of Anita Desai. Anita Desai, the leading novelist, once again came into the world through his novel Fasting Feasting. Actually, this is the finding of the fictional technique in her novel. Fasting Feasting, an illustrious novel of Anita Desai, again valedictory for efficiency in field of Anglo-Indian fiction. Shortlisted for Booker Prize, and this was not the first time. This was the third time when her novel was shortlisted for the prize. Desai is also known for her sensibility, especially for the women. In a true sense, she flourishingly illustrated female Indian characters, and their absolute world is her entire fiction. From Maya till Uma, main focus of Desai was on the feeling and frustrations of the Indian women's. But this time, there is another type of technique is applied by her. Fictional technique is like a backbone of a novel. We can't deny that without a technique, anything can be presented. The word technique is derived from the Greek word technicus, techne, means an art and artifice. According to Mark Sorrell, technique is the only means he has of discovering, exploring, developing his subject, of converting meanings, and finally of evaluating it. For writer adopt some technique for presenting for his entire work. We can't deny that no one has the technique. Technique may be good, may be bad, but each and everyone must have a technique, and definitely they have a technique for presenting the things. On finer level, it means contrived symbolism, imaginary, simple narration, chronicle levels of events, flashback, stream of consciousness, schematization of chapter division, etc. On other level, it deals dialogue, character, language, and plot, etc. These are the basic concept of the technique. But for presenting the fasting feasting, Desai has used several innovative techniques, as the name itself is a technique. First part of the novel, fasting, symbolizes India. Generally, it is in our mind that the word fasting means what? That we lack something in our life. And through this word, she has symbolized the fasting, and that is what the India. The chief protagonist of this part, Uma, has a long tale of suffering. Being the elder daughter, especially female word, she had become a ayah, babysitter. Oh, fine, because she was a female child, and the family was in hope of a hope of a male child. And when the birth of Arun take place, she had become the babysitter. She could not go to school, but her brother goes USA for higher studies. This is the scenario. This is the condition of Indian traditional family, where education is fixed for the boys and education for girls means what? The primary education, a little bit, etc. But in Uma case, she could not go to proper school, which is the basic, you can say, basic need of a child, and right also, which our constitutions give. But here the case is just like a babysitter, just like a ayah, and brother goes to the US for the higher study. Uma, Aruna, Anamika, Meera Masi, all of them have their own story. But the story tells their suffering. And Uma's mother, Desai, try to bring out everyone's story in their own perspective. Little bit, Aruna is different because she does not want to follow the path which Uma has chosen. Yeah, not chosen, but that is given by her parents, the destiny which is given by her. The second part of the novel, feasting, for what? Western countries. Lot of desire, lot of things are there, but still there is something that the feasting, but actually they are fasting. Everything is there, but nothing is there. Emotional fasting. That is the best technique. used by this side. Feasting, the second part, particularly based on diaspora image with Arun, and Mrs. Pantoon's family, especially Millie. Marine's constant vomiting is caused by her excess and erratic eating. The food metaphor has a long implications of suggesting the two culture of India and US. For Arun, it's difficult to adjust in the new type of atmosphere, where Mrs. Patu, to whom he see that the sitting for taking the sun bath, and which was totally against his culture, and even he could not adjust in the presence of his fellow Indian residing there for their others. These way, the two value system has been presented by Desai. Two's value system, for presenting the two value system, Desai used the two words fasting and feasting. Use of poetry reveal the inner frustration and desire of the character. In the words of Wordsworth, poetry is the spontaneous flow of our powerful feeling. So obviously, poetry is a type of technique which is used by the novelist to put out, you have to create, you have to find out the inner feeling. And here again, Desai has used this technique to reveal the inner frustrations of the characters. Like Uma, their desire is going to the school, and she recites the school prayers. And when she grows up, she reads the books. Why? Because she has intense desire to read something more. On the other hand, we see the Meera Masi, a widower. A widower who has lifestyle is a traditional way of living in India, and she recites the devotional rhymes. Uma recites, Jesus loved me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so, means there is a desire to the school, but she could not go. And that frustrations come through the prayers, and she recites these prayers and indicates that there is a desire in the hearts of a child to go to the school. And Meera Masi says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, he maketh me to lie down in the green pasture. Her image is like a devotional lady and traditional lady of India. Various Hindi words are used like laddu, dal, etc. for creating an Indian atmosphere. Even Mrs. Pantoons pronounces Arun, creates the very way of speaking Hindi, especially in US or the Western countries, as they are not aware about the Hindi words. So at the time of speaking these words, they pronounce in their own way. And for presenting the atmosphere, Desai has used these techniques to create the atmosphere that the lady is not of India, but the lady is from the abroad. Another a new device, innovative device of Mama Papa, a single word. Mama is one word, Papa is another word. Actually, both are the individual personality. But here we find that Mama has no voice and totally depends on husband's decision. Even she is not, you can say, self-dependent on for any matter related to their children or household. For that, innovative technique is used by Mrs. Desai, that she has put the word Mama Papa, and sounds Papa means the Mama has no identity in the house, especially to find out that these characters, especially the female characters, are just struggling for their identity. To focus on the fact that the mother has no identity in the family, she only depends on her husband. Characters' names. This is the special technique used by this Mrs. Desai to bring about the character and their name, just like Uma. Uma means what? Uma is a Sanskrit word and it is a goddess name. But Uma means tranquility, splendor, and night. And she is very calm. She is calm and even control her emotions. And when the other characters, especially her sister, asks her about her relations with her husband, as she spent 1 day or 2 days with her husband, she keeps calm. Night also symbolizes, night means what? Darkness. Her life is a dark. There is a little hope. It might be possible something good will be happen, but nothing is going to be happen. Arun, being the son, at advanced age, hope of a family, and mother took risk of a pregnancy at advanced stage, as they are in the hope of what? A male child. Device of putting Mama Papa and focusing on these. And what about their names? And their names are just signifies these things, and various Hindi words, and presenting these words through their names. Like Meera Masi, devotional name. No one can put this name better than her. And Anamika, mother's name has no identity like her. Anamika itself is a Hindi name, where Anamika means the person who has no name, who no identity. So they are just struggling for the identity. A stream of consciousness through Uma and Uma's mother as they go in the past to narrate their story and correlate with the present. As her mothers admit in front of her child, in front of Uma, the situation is the same as it was in her time. Nothing has brought change in the mindset and the living standard of the people. The same condition for the females is still in India. And the things, a generation gap, but even the gap with the same scenario is taking place. Various symbols are used to represent the dualities of life. One rule for the boy, second rule for the girls. The girls can't take the laddu, but the boys can take the laddu. So many questions asked to the girls. Either you have taken the bath before entering into the kitchen, either you have washed your hand before touching these things. So the generation gap to Aruna and presence is also in front of us. She does not want to walk on the traditional path on which the entire girls are walking of her surrounding and even of her house. Openness of West, but they are emotionally starving as there is no good relations between them, and each and everyone is struggling there. This is another type of the contrast we find between the East and West. Because of these qualities, because of these, we can say, the technique, the chairperson of the Booker Prize committee had said at that time, if we could have chosen a runner-up, we would undoubtedly have given the runner award to Anita Desai and Fasting Feasting, a most beautiful novel, very moving, very funny, terribly elaborative of what happens to women in the different parts of the world. So these are the techniques through which Desai has presented so many problems related to the female world, and not only in India but in the abroad also. The book attract the readers, aware the readers about the East and West and their way on which the two systems, the two different value systems are going on. Thanks a lot for it.
We request Dr. Toshihi Menla, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Don Bosco College, Kohima, Nagaland, to kindly present her paper. Dr. Toshihi Menla, now please.
Good evening to you all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. I am Dr. Toshimiya, Assistant Professor, Don Bosco College, Kohima, Nagaland. My topic for the presentation is Theme of Exile in Selected Points of Lakshmi Kir and Himani Banerjee and Sochit Kalsi. Introduction: A writer begins as an individual, though not necessarily on a personal note. On reflection and during discourse, one becomes conscious of elements like identity, region, the state or the nation, and of cultural difference and acceptance. A sensitive individual has an inherent capacity to observe the otherness of things, even the otherness of alien culture, and negotiated a space within the literary agenda of a multicultural society. Many diasporic writers are naturally challenged by a multiplicity of affiliation and city of affiliation, and they are compelled to examine the value of root and home. Salman Rushdie, in his in Natural Homelands, he talks about the sense of loss of experienced by exile and immigrants, and their urge to reclaim what was lost. He talks of this. He says that a writer in his own possession are haunted by some sense of loss, some urge to reclaim it, to look like even if the wrecks of it mutated into a pillars of salt. Indeed, Rushdie views the immigrants has views the immigrants his, which has become the central or defining figure of the 20th century, which dramatizes the sense of alienation. Similarly, Homi Bhabha, in the location of culture, he describes the diasporic condition through the disjunctive temporality, which refers to both here and the elsewhere, the space of the present location and the remembrance of the past. Indian diasporic poets, they have acclaimed in the literary field. Several contemporary writers have gained international recognition, and the poets, most of the poets, they have ventured out to different countries, and I'll be focusing on the diasporic writers in Canada. The racial, religious, cultural, and linguistic diversity, which is accentuated by immigration pattern and the various waves of the diaspora, which offers a remarkably varied assemble and amalgamation of different people under one uh, climate. But sometimes, what we can say is that the mainstream Canadian may be openly opposed, judging South Asians as simply a two different kind of immigrant. So the purpose of this paper is to work on writers like Rashmi Gill, Himani Banerjee, and Sarojit Kalsi, who are Canadian citizens of Indian origin. A common theme among these three writers is so much on the inner world of feeling and sensibility that they openly portrayed in their poems. Lakshmi Gill's points are strong attacks on racism and sexism, accurately sensitive to her Indian identity and heritage. Her poetry revives memory, though it also evokes the Canadian mindset. In one of her poems, Me, she is protesting and demanding her own space in voice. The physical description of her makes her in Asian the other to the Canadians. The formation of the new self here takes place in the periphery of the self and the other. I go to him. Aha, she's Asian, the slick straight here that forms in a Dobban. Ha, a Dobban, haha, the Oriental. The word Asian and Oriental here defines most of the South Asian immigrants, and it is this term she fights against so as to earn a social recognition, both in terms of mental and physical sense. And her other poem, Letter to a Prospective Immigrant, Gill voices the feeling of uh, the she she voices the feeling of a minority encounters not who encounters not only a hostile landscape but also a hostile society that insists on giving the Asians with the Western notion of the Oriental. It is a warning to the immigrants that things like joy, sacrifice, expiation, communion are nowhere to be found. So there is a hint that communion it needs is a blazing that the immigrants may have it on powder bring, but not to expect the blazings in this cold, harsh, hostile environment. Next, we have Sarojit Kalsi, who was born in Punjab and migrated to Canada in 1974. She writes about violence against women and such preoccupation with social issues raises her personal points to the level of political. In the poem Migratory Bird, she describes the immigrant present condition and the yearning to return back home, ending her exile. She finds herself increasingly imprisoned, and she said, I quote, we, the migratory birds, are here this season, thinking we will fly back to our home, for sure no one knows which invisible cage imprisons us. Here, there is the urge of going back to the past, to one's own homeland, as Rushdie says in Imaginary Homelands, that it is the, I got, that he said, it is the present that is foreign, and that the past is a home, a lost home in a lost city in the midst of a lost time. So these are simple human expressions and experience which one faces out of one's own country. Besides these feelings of loneliness and uprootment, women as a class face the general issue of oppression, violence, and injustice. These embedding issues have the same voice both in home and abroad. We have Imani Banerjee. She's a critic and an academician, and she is interested in feminist theory, gender and colonialism, class and race issues. She's deeply sensitive to the issues related to racism and raises her protest against all forms of humiliation. The omen marked by softness, curves, that this thing called a wife in this poem wife talks about individuality and all resistance erased through the centuries during which feminist during which wifehood has been constructed by patriarchy. This poem can also be seen as a feminist poem, which questions the confinement that marriage enforces and the subjugation that reduces woman to just a wife, a chronic non-human form. In another poem, she talks about she is protest against all forms of oppression, and the letter to home she talks about her feelings of exile, and again in Bucky Go Home here, Banerjee she confronts racial issues and the discrimination that South Asian endowment with uh, in and the discrimination that South Asian endowment with other not white people have to encounter in a country like Canada. So this in all these selected points that we have studied that I have analyzed, the poet goes through this painful process of recognition and renegotiation of their featured subjectivity. And what makes these two writers comparable above and beyond the fact is that they deal with similar issues that each of the authors speak from a place of authority on questions of cultural hybridity, dislocation, immigration, and belonging or unbelonging, as they have all undergone these thrilling process and experiences. Their literary sensibility, especially, is a rare combination of a perspective eye and quiet voice, which quite legibly delineate and delete what goes in and around human life and the world. Thank you.
May I now request Dr. Arundev Parikh, Assistant Professor, and Dr. Soni Kulshrestha, Associate Professor, Manipal University, Jaipur, Rajasthan, to kindly present their paper.
Hello everyone. The title of my paper is Depicting Class Struggle and Exploitation of Rights, a Marxist Study of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. The paper has been written by Dr. Arundev Parikh and Dr. Soni Kulshrestha from Manipal University, Jaipur, Rajasthan. The ideology of Marx has brought a phenomenal change in the world order. If we look at the ideology of Karl Marx, we find that his ideology is very much available and prevalent in literature. Marxist critics looks at literature as a social power, which directly or indirectly present the class, gender struggle, and exploitation within the society. Through literature, all types of struggles are reflected in open or hidden form and has helped the readers to understand the socio-cultural norms in a given society. If you look at the introduction part, what we have started with, if we begin with the term ideology, it will serve a better purpose to understand Karl Marx. If we think about the term ideology, many questions may arise in our mind. What is ideology? What significance it has if related to Marx? How does it influence literature? A general definition in a dictionary, if you look at the definition of ideology, what we find is a set of ideas on which a political or economic system is based. In general, ideology is a social consciousness that prevails during a specific period in a definite class. So, if you look at literature, literature also serves in the same way as an ideology does. As a cultural production, literature is a form of ideology which creates illusion and prevents people from perceiving reality to great extent. It works on the prevailing ideologies of a particular age. Marxist literary critics look at literature as a social power. The role of Marxism in regard to literature, as described by Edmund Wilson, is to throw a great deal of light on the origins and social significance of works of art. Now, in another article written by Avtar Singh, what we find in that article is Marx and Engels see art and literature as aspects of social consciousness and consider it impossible to understand them as proceeding only from their internal laws of development. In their opinion, the essence, origin, development, etc., play a key role in which the economic factor plays the decisive role. Literature produced in any era, directly or indirectly, depicts the society of that age. The ideologies and the doctrines of Marx has become a very prominent movement in art and literature. Marxism influenced both writer and a critic. It was in the 20th century that the entire world registered and acknowledged the Marxist viewpoint. No single nation is to be found without the Marxist ideologies. Though literature of all the preceding eras possessed such sentiments, yet the particular term, the Marxist outlook, didn't come into force until the 19th century. Whether it's Shakespeare's King Lear or Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, all these works depict the picture of the ruling class. The Russian, German, and American writings are also filled deep with the doctrines and ideologies of Marx. Playwrights like Maxim Gorky and Leonid Andrei carry on the Marxist outlook within their works. Even in the field of Indian literature, mostly the writers from Bengal adopted the Marxist themes in their works. Toni Morrison, Afro-American writer, through her works looks at poverty and class oppression from the eyes and minds of the poor and the proletariat. Her novels like The Bluest Eye, published in 1970, Sula in 1974, Tar Baby in 1981, Jazz 1992 depict the problem of gender and class. We find in her works the condition of blacks as that of the proletariats and of whites as that of the capitalists. Class struggle and exploitation of rights in Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye can easily be seen. Class struggle is one of the major issues faced by the African Americans, mainly because of their color, resulting in racial discrimination. They were treated as slaves and they didn't even have the right to vote until the civil rights movement turned successful. All the characters were put into hierarchies based on class and race. Class struggle is one of the major issues faced by the African Americans, mainly because of their color, resulting in racial discrimination. They were treated as slaves and they didn't even have the right to vote until the civil rights movement turned successful. All the characters were put into hierarchies based on class. And in continuation, racism, class struggle are one of the primary obstacles for Africans, and Morrison has beautifully shown the struggle of all the black characters in the novel, The Bluest Eye. If we talk about the black identity in Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, Piccola and all the other characters, Piccola is the protagonist. Piccola and all the other characters had no rights. They are given no respect because of their class and black color of their skin. All the characters try to gain power and respect in their own respective way. They do not have an identity of their own, as they were blacks and were basically considered slaves and had no right to even speak against any of the white Americans. To conclude, this paper makes a Marxist study of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. In this novel, we come across the characters' journey towards finding their own identity. All the characters, including the protagonist, they struggle hard to have their own identity. Through Piccola's story, we get to know about the culture of the 1940s, and we also learn about the society and the social norms. The struggle and exploitation faced by all the characters are quite real, and it appears that it is really difficult to be an African American. Thank you. These are the references.
May I now request Mr. J.R.K. Prasad, lecturer, AGS Junior College, Tirupati, Andhra Pradesh, India, to kindly present his paper. Sir, please, kindly.
Now I am going to present my paper titled Witty, like any other linguistic act. It has the base of linguistic activity as its center. Translation has to be studied both as the product and as the process. The need for systematic study of translation arises directly from the problems encountered during the actual translation process. Those who are working in the field of translation should bring their practical experiences to the theoretical discussion. Translation develops three qualities: accuracy, clarity, and flexibility. Translation traces the learner to search is flexibility for the most appropriate words, accuracy to convey what is meant, that is clarity. Translation is not just pouring wine from one bottle to another. It is more than a triple matching of words, grammatical structures, and cultural contexts, which is a difficult process. Eugene A. Nieder thinks that it is likely that the message of language A here means source language text. It is decoded into a concept, and that this concept then provides the basis for the generation of an utterances in language B, wherein language B is target language text. Translation depends on the two activities of reading and writing. So, it will always vary with each translator. It means translation depends on the translator. While translating from source text to target text, there are certain problems. Different kinds of problems arise from gaps in languages that cannot be filled in translating because for a word that may be quite familiar in source language, there is no equivalent word in target language. The main problem of translation involves problems of establishing equivalences between the source text and the target text. All types of translation involves problems like loss of meaning, addition of meaning, and skewing of meaning. The whole problem of translation is a problem to the reader to allure the process lexical, syntactical, and semantic meanings. The problem of equivalence cannot be defined as the search for the sameness of the message, since sameness is a myth even within the same language. Unless the problems of translations of different types of text are considered, the study of problems of translation will not be completed. While translating different words, the translator is faced with choices such as faithful translations, adaptations, and free versions. Now, let us discuss each language form. A poem is an extremely complex literary art in which sounds, words, images interact in forward and backward directions. The careful use of words and sounds constitutes problems regarding retaining the sameness in the target text. Next, let me discuss about prose texts. Problems of translation of the prose texts are of a different type. Translation of prose texts poses the problem of understanding the relative relations in between the structure and the craft of conveying meaning. The problems of translating dramatic texts take on a different hue and color. The first problem before the translator of a dramatic text is whether to consider the target text as completely in itself or to treat it as incomplete as it will be completely realized only through performance. If the target language text and the source language text stand on the basis of equality, then the problems of translations are cultural and social. A study of the translations within a particular period may throw light on the various roles the translator has to adopt. Now, let me conclude my presentation with these remarks. Whatever may be the problems of translation with regard to meaning, synonymy is to be maintained between source language text and the target language text. Translation is neither a creative art nor an imitative art, but it stands somewhere between these two. This is, I think, very important, which we have to remember, we have to note down. Translation, I repeat, translation is neither a creative art nor an imitative art, but it stands somewhere between these two. As the translation does not follow the inspirations of the translator, it is not creative and it is not imitative art, because it must not only convey the idea of the work translated, but must also transform it. I have taken the help of these books. Here I put these references. I'm thankful to all these authors. Thank you all. I thank all the organizers of this.
May I now request Ms. P. Josephine Stella Tilaga, Assistant Professor, Bishop Heber College, Tiruchirappalli, to kindly present her paper. Madam Josephine, please.
Hello, good evening. This is Josephine Stella, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Bishop Heber College. We have a topic about non-human beings and how they are surviving and how sometimes we are against them. So I have taken the novel Shallows from Tim Benton's. He has something to share with us, that is the plight of non-human beings. Tim Benton's Shallows, viewed through the coexistence theoretical approach. So this is my topic of it. Timothy John Benton was born on 4th August 1960. He has won Miles Franklin Award for Shallows in the year 1984. And Tim Benton is a well-known Australian author, a novelist, and a writer of both fiction and non-fiction. He is an environmentalist, and moreover, he was called a very good writer and a living treasure of this area. And all his novels deal with the landscape and the native people of Australia, He is an Aboriginal writer. Many of his novels are set in Western Australia. So Albany is considered the inspiration for author Tim Burton's fictional town, Angeles, which features in many of his works. He lived in Albany in early teenage years, and which he refers to as the town of Angeles in his novels Breath, The Shallows, The Loki, Leonard Legend. And now we are entering into the novel Shallows, which has been written in 1984. It's one of the best novels written by Tim Burton, and he has won Miles Franklin Award for this novel, and he has won 4 times Miles Franklin Award for his writings. And the novel Shallows deals with the lives of whales in Angeles, in Western Australian coast. And whaling in Australia started in the late 18th century. There is no record that Aborigines hunted whales. After colonization, the native people were instructed to hunt whales. So Europeans were aware that whales were found to be found off the coast of Australia from at least 1699, when the British maritime explorer, naturalist, and buccaneer William Dampier from 1652 to 1715 sailed along the coast of Western Australia, where he reported the sea was plentiful, stocked with the largest whales that I ever saw. Bay whaling stations established on the coast by colonists in the 19th century attracted tribal aborigines who would camp nearby and feast on the discarded whale carcasses after the bubbler had been removed. And some Aboriginal men served on board and bay whaling stations as pulling hands or manned lookout posts where their keen eyesight allowed them to see approaching whales without the aid of a telescope. A few served on pelagic whaling ships operating out of Sydney and Hobart. The next one is we're going to talk about bioregional literature. Bioregional literature gives a lot of emphasis to place or region, and it is also an alternative way of thinking at engaging with region that humans live in. A human forgets that the non-human beings have equal rights to live on the planet. So we have to come to a conclusion that the other living beings also have equal rights to live on this planet. So we have to discuss a lot with that. And human beings try to celebrate the region they live in, but do not understand or consciously give importance to the animals and birds of the region. And this paper tries to study the plight of those non-human beings. The characters are Queenie Coxon, Cleveland, David Copper. So these are 3 characters in this novel, and some minor characters are there. And Queenie Coxon is a heroine. She's a heroine of this novel, Cleveland, her husband. And David Copper, he gave some instructions about the whaling industry, and he had a diary of it. And the story runs with the seascape and whales, and the people of this land are not conscious about the region. As Martin Heidegger says, he advocates be a dweller, not a resident in a planet. So be a dweller, not a resident in the planet. So every creature or every organism has its role and equal rights to live on earth like humans. Only dweller can follow this, not a resident. Be a dweller, not a resident. So I emphasize this point because being a dweller, we will not do damage to any living beings or any creatures around us. So we take care for them. So we take care, we more importance to them. So this is a work of a dweller, but a resident, just we reside in a place and we go off. We are not thinking about the future, and we are not doing we are not doing any benefits to them. So this is what Martin Heidegger says. He advocates to be a dweller, not a resident in the planet. So every creature organism has its role. So each and every organism has a role. If a human being has a role, why not a animal has a role? So it has a role. It is some animals doing some work in this planet. So without some animals or without some creatures, we may not live in this world. So each and every animal or an organism has its role, like humans. So only a dweller can follow this, not a resident. Queen Coxon, the heroine of this novel and a wife of Cleveland, opposed the whaling industry and joined anti-whaling protest group. Both of them are in the tent and chatting with each other. At that time, she was telling about her childhood experience about whales in the region. He was thinking about her past, the reminiscence of her age, and she was talking with her husband. And when she was a girl, she saw a flamboyant black whale was inching up towards the house. Once she saw it, she was frightened and went to Papa's room and slept. This was a situation when she was a girl. And after that, uh, uh, at that time, people were so happy when they saw whales near the region. After a year, she did not see any bird near the seashore. So something might have happened at that time. There are too many reasons for the disappearance of whales among the whaling industry plays lead role. So whaling is one of the most important occupations of people or those who are living in Australia or whatever it may be. So thus they have to whale the fishes and they have to sell them for many purposes because they're getting oil and some important materials from it. So they are killing whales and they are not a dweller, they are resident. So dweller, just they are being conscious about their nature as well as about the animals around us, region around us. We have to save our region. So that is very important. Killing the whales with guns for their own purposes also influence the disappearance of whales. So you have a very good line, spouting vapor like gun smoke. So it's like whales have been killed like anything. So it was killing with guns and all. So it's like a gun smoke, and she saw everything in her childhood days and after her childhood days also, and that's why she was opposing everything. So once I saw it, but now it is it's not visible for me. So somewhat I'm lacking to it, and she's fond of whales also. And the whales have evacuated not because of natural urge, but the crucial and ignorant nature of humans about their co-creatures. As humans try to celebrate our nature, so that's by region literature. As humans try to celebrate our region, so try to celebrate your region. So what is there in your region? Try to celebrate with that. So they got whales and all. They got some creatures also might have been there. So they are not enjoying with that. So just they are killing it and spoiling everything around them. So this is not fair and part of nature. So just you have to avoid such things and you should not do harm to any creatures around us as they have equal rights to live in this world and we have to appreciate them and you have to celebrate a region also. Not admiring nature, not looking at nature and not admiring it. The hills are beautiful, the things are beautiful, not like that. Just go with that and understanding why it is there. So if the cow was there in your nearest to your place, so it is good for it. But if a cow is not there in your place or we may not able to see it. So we have to find it out. So what is the reason behind it? Why it's not appearing today? So what is the reason behind it? And we have to find it out. So that is how we are understanding the creatures around us and what we are identifying what happened to them. So these are the questions for why reasonable teachers. And so we have to follow such things, and we have to be very conscious about our nature and animals and birds and so on. As humans try to celebrate our region, so admire and celebrate everything in your region, but consciously giving importance to the region.
May I now request Ms. Priya Datta, research scholar, CMR University, Bangalore, Karnataka, to kindly present her paper. Now, Ms. Priya Datta, madam, please.
This is Priya Datto, and today I'm going to talk about Devdases system, how it evolved, how the system was started, and during the different course of time, how the system modified itself, and what is the scenario in the present India. So, before I proceed, let me share you my screen. Okay, so the topic of my presentation is Devdasis, casteism, and prostitution, cursed or created. So while talking about the Devdasi system, I'm also going to talk about the Devdasis, the situation, their situation in the ancient India and in modern India, how the system is related to casteism, and how this system gradually turned into prostitution. So this system was initially started by us, by the people. It was created by the people. But the people whom we selected for this system, they are considered as cursed by the same people, by the same society. So before I start, and let me introduce you with the word Devdasi. Devdasi, as you can see, it is originated from the word. It is originated from Sanskrit word Deva and Dasi. Deva means God, and Dasi is known as the female servant. Hence, Devdasi are the female unmarried women who serve their whole life in the service of the god. These women are not allowed to marry any mortal human being because they are considered as the wives of those gods. So they, during that period of time, this idea actually gave them a huge respect from the subjects and other folks. This system is an old religious practice which is still continued in the few states of India like Kerala, Orissa, Assam, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and other southern parts of India. This practice was actually started during the 6th century AD in South India. And the idea was from a queen who wanted to dedicate few women in order to honor the god. So these women will remain unmarried for their whole life so that they can dedicate their life to the god. Now, let us talk about the history of the Devdasis. This Devdasi system was started during the time of ancient time of Cholas and Pandyas. Now, these Devdasis were highly respected and they are also considered as the royal courtiers. However, they were not allowed to marry any mortal human being, but they can maintain a relationship. They can maintain a relationship with the people of their choice. So they
they develop a relationship with the people, but whenever they give birth to any child, the father is not responsible to take the responsibility of that child. And it was not necessary at that point of time also, because there was no economic dependency on anyone by the Devdasis, because the Devdasis were prosperous and very rich at that point of time. They were rewarded with abundant gold and land by the people, and these gold and land were given to them on the basis of their performance or the rituals they performed in the temple. So they were already economically independent, and hence they were not responsible, or they were not independent on any other people. But the things changed when there was Islamic invasion and British rule in India. During the Islamic invasion, the allies or the enemies tried to destroy the ancient temples. With the destruction of these temples, the Devdasis lost their patronages, because each temple has their own, each temple is dedicated to few groups of Devdasis. Now, since the temple is already destroyed, the Devdasis lost their importance, because they cannot survive without those temples, because they do not carry any importance without those temples. However, this situation was soon handled by the powerful kings, and the situation was revived again. But during the British rule, the Devdasi system affected very badly, because the British were not able to understand the importance, or they were not able to recognize what importance this Devdasi system hold. Hence, they considered these Devdasis as roadside prostitutes. While every other kingdom were coming under the East India Company, the Devdasis were left to survive on their own. Since those kings who were able to give financial help to these Devdasis were not allowed to help or to run the system anymore. Hence, the Devdasis were left to fight in poverty. Hence, with the time, they were turned into prostitution to run their family. In today's era, now this time, these Devdasis has already lost their respect, the rich patronages, and their importance as well. Now let us talk about the shadow of casteism in the Devdasi system. The casteism was always there in the Devdasi system. It was also there in the ancient time when the system was flourishing. Because, in ancient time, women from all caste and creed used to come and join the Devdasis on their own choice. So there were Devdasis from upper castes as well as from the lower caste also. But the biasedness or the difference can be seen during the rituals done by them. While the upper caste Devdasis used to perform the rituals and prayers in the temple, and they also used to perform in the royal courts, the lower Devdasis were supposed to do the little jobs or the menial jobs such as cleaning and washing the temple. Hence, this casteism can be seen. This casteism can be seen in Devdasi from a long period of time. During the different period of time, while the upper caste people left this tradition, the lower caste people are still bearing the burden of this system. This system allows the lower caste people to serve as an excuse in order to shed off their responsibilities of the girl child. Now, since the family is too poor to run the or to run or survive the whole family, the little girl or the poor girls were forced to become Devdases, who eventually become the prostitutes. Now, what is the situation of Devdasi system in present time? Let us discuss. Now, in the present scenario, as I told you, is very different from the ancient time. In ancient time, the Devdasis were also learned, very learned. They were the great poetess, and they were also proficient in Indian classical dancing. But in today's time, the Devdasi practice is majorly continued to support sex trade and prostitution. There were many social reformers and activists who stood against this practice. Yet, and even not only the activists, but the government also implied many strict rules and regulations for the abolition of this system. Yet this evil practice is still being continued in some selected regions of India. Now, if we will, there is a documentary by Vice. Um, in that documentary, there is an interview of different Devdasis, and they shared their experiences that how they were supposed to run their families. They were forced to become Devdasis, and in order to run their families, they had to take up the job of prostitution also. Now, sadly, this system is still continued in India, and in a report it is said that more than 44,000 Devdasis are active in today's India. Now, this is really confusing for us because this system was started by us. Then why this biasedness is there? Why we still differentiate, or why we still believe that these Devdasis are cursed in today's India? So, since we are the creator of this system, we should not curse, we should not consider the Devdasis as cursed. So we need to change it. We need to change the system. We need to change our mindset as well. Thank you. So this presentation of mine shows the glimpse of this evil practice, how it started, how it is right now, and it questions why the whole thing is still being continued. If it is evil, if it is bad, or if it is considered as if these people are considered as untouchables, why we still support to continue this practice? We need to think about it. We need to question this practice as well. Thank you all.
May I now request Ms. Tanushri, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, New Delhi, to kindly present her paper. Now, Ms. Tanushri.
Ekphrastic reading of The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. Words and images have always been the core of our communication. They have always worked side by side in giving us a concept through which we translate the world around us. A portrait captures the sitter at a specific time. It in a way tells the story of the sitter's life constrained by the time in which the painting was made. Same goes with biographies, as it chooses the medium of words to paint a life-size portrait of the subject. In the case of autobiographies and self-portraits, the story is often self-reflective, in the voice of the artist. There have been times when such autobiographies and portraits have been written in third-person perspective. One such example is James Joyce's novel, The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. According to Richard Ellman, This novel's main organizing principle is, I quote, gestation of a soul, unquote, which leads to the idea of a number of canvases within a series of self-portraits over time. If we go by the idea of Aristotle, who believed that initially a human fetus has the soul of a vegetable and later turns into the soul of an animal and finally through the process of ensoulment becomes a human soul. Here he gives us a few concepts to think about, like what exactly it is to have a soul of a vegetable, animal, and human fetus. And can an adult still have the soul of a vegetable or animal? The way Joyce has painted a series of self-portraits with the color of self-conscience and psyche, it feels as if he's taking us through the different stages of his soul, which is the artist in him. The narrative technique of stream of consciousness that he used in the portrait of an artist as a young man is similar to what painters paint in expressionist art forms. The novel takes us through the emotional experiences of Stephen Dedalus without making him a likable or non-likable character. It is the existence of the character that matters and his psychological journey towards maturity. The first chapter starts with, I quote, once upon a time, and a very good time it was, unquote. Like a fairy tale, such kind of language represents innocence, simplicity, which is symbolic of the things and events that will happen in the first chapter. The narrative starts with the earliest and faintest memories of the childhood of Stephen Dedalus, which comprises of his rhymes and tales, and the noise that he hears, through which he associates himself from the world around him. All he encounters is abstract sound and image, which lead him to identify people and things around him. Language and images play a very important role in the portrait of Stephen Dedalus. At all stages of his life, it is through the hues of language and colors that he translates the world around him. Whether it be with his broken small words or syllables or the images of his mother hiding her tears from him and waving him goodbye, all these dots connect to give meaning to the things and events that are happening around him, whether they be family, school affairs, or political affairs. Once when he fell ill, he had this thought of dying, and he imagined if he would die before his parents came to take him, how would the funeral be like? He pictures all the small details of the image of funeral, where all his friends would be and where and how everybody will be and will behave. Where will the priest be and rector and all others, including his dead body? He also got reminiscent of a small poetry that Brigid had taught him, which also became part of the larger picture of the funeral. I quote, ding dong the castle bell, farewell my mother. Bury me in the old churchyard beside my oldest brother. My coffin shall be black. 6 angels at my back, 2 to sing and 2 to pray, and 2 to carry my soul away. I unquote. All this was like art, which gave pleasure to Stephen, the artist in whose minds this painting was made. But at the same time, the subject of the painting was meant to be sad, and all colors and hues were painted to arouse the expected melancholic environment. Hence, it was not difficult for him to feel happy and sad at the same time. A German expressionist artist, George Grossoff, has also painted a funeral scene in the year 1918. Even though the painting is dedicated to the German psychiatrist and avant-garde writer Oscar Paniza, which obviously gives us a perspective to look at the painting, the funeral. Yet, there is a lot of universality to the painting. One can look at this modern painting through the point of view of Stephen Dedalus. This intense red light in the painting gives it a dramatic effect, which Stephen's image for sure has. The small church in the painting shows the importance of religion that was taught to the young boys, which he could not completely understand, but one thing that he knew was that the church was inevitable in his image, even it be that of his funeral. The multitude of people, where it is difficult to differentiate from one person to another, are like his thoughts, which are tangled with struggles of understanding reality and different aspects of human life. The painting evokes the feeling of both melancholy and admiration, which means that the beauty of the painting lies in the way paint, pain and sadness has been portrayed. The beauty of death, sadness, and pain is the work of art. Art makes all these, which are already part of life and existence, more acceptable by making them beautiful. When Anne Sexton writes about the painting Starry Nights by Vincent van Gogh, it is her death that she wishes for, and how things would be when she breathed her last. She makes her deathbed so beautiful with her words, while admiring and wishing for the painting of Starry Nights to come alive. With the changing hues and shadows, the struggle for sanity and freedom become the saddest and the most beautiful part. Both the painting by Vincent van Gogh and the poem by Anne Sexton takes on a journey within oneself, where there is an apocalyptic situation through which one has to traverse in order to reach the state of complete sanity, if there is something of its kind. The portrait of the artist is made up of thoughts and tunnels of thought process of the creative mind, which makes everything beautiful in its vision. It is the whirlpool of thoughts which is responsible in the making of Stephen Dedalus, which is the artist in James Joyce himself. Stephen Dedalus is the artistic persona of James Joyce, which is independent of Joyce himself, and that is one of the reasons behind the use of third-person perspective while drawing his pen portrait of himself. Stephen Dedalus goes back to the myth of Daedalus, where Daedalus had made wax wings for both his son and himself to escape from the prison. What Daedalus wanted was freedom, and flying would give him that, opening a whole new universe of possibilities. An artist cannot grow living in pigeonholes made by the family, society, or nation. An artist is beyond all these worldly barriers as his truth. The ultimate death of Daedalus and his son Icarus is not important in understanding their existence, but their ultimate fight towards freedom and ambition to reach somewhere and to discover something which had not been discovered, and that is important. They both saw a vision that Joyce wants the readers to see. It is not the words and sentences of Joyce that he wants the readers to read, but it is the vision that he is trying to show us which is more important. The whole novel of James Joyce can be seen through the lens of Rembrandt's self-portraits. He is one among the artists who have put art before thyself to the extent that they have made themselves an extension of their art. Rembrandt year by year has produced his self-portraits, daring to stare into his own reality without getting prejudiced or disturbed by his personal circumstances. He is in the process of meditation or on a journey towards knowing thyself, which forms a small unit, which is part of the building of the whole universe. Shadows are generally an important part of Rembrandt's portraits and is one of his signature styles. Generally, when he paints one eye towards the shadow, it kind of invites the viewers inside the image. When Joyce is painting his self-portrait, chapter by chapter, he makes sure to take the readers through the vision of the psyche of the sitter, which here is Stephen Dedalus. Joyce, like Rembrandt, is trying to portray the development and birth of an artist with a pinch of realism. Joyce takes the readers through all the aspects and circumstances and times of the sitter or the subject, Stephen Dedalus. He is seen as an innocent child who doesn't understand if it's okay to kiss her mother or not, and struggles with his thoughts that why was he bullied when he said that he kissed his mother before sleeping, and then again why he changed his answer to not kissing his mother good night. In both the cases, he was laughed at by the boys. Then one can see his lust for sexual adventures and then attraction towards religion. He is confused what to choose and what not to choose, and ends up tasting the fruits of both of them. Later, he frees himself from both of them and starts on a new journey towards finding what is love, beauty, truth, and art. From Stephen Hero to Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, the journey of the artist has been measured in canvases. Thank you.
May I now request Ms. Sonia Chada and Dr. Parul Mishra from School of Humanities and Social Sciences, GD Goenka University, Gurugram, Haryana, to kindly present their paper. Madam, please.
Respected Chairperson, and a very good evening, one and all. My name is Sonia Chatta. I'm a research scholar of J.D. Goenka University from the Department of School of Humanities and Social Sciences. I'm working under the guidance of Dr. Parul Mishra, an assistant professor from J.D. Goenka University. My topic is Quest of a Common Man to Darwish, a Crossing Society, the route Maulana Jalaluddin to Rumi. About Rumi, Rumi started his life as a normal child, a renowned figure of the world. His struggle, a smooth journey, and various struggles he faced from Maulana Jalaluddin to Rumi becoming a prominent figure. My objectives are to find out his universal appeal for the upliftment of world humanity under Sama canopy. Rumi and his philosophy is still relevant, holds up with guidance for the coming generations. Lessons through his life, he provided his inner strength to fight for humanity. He created a new universalism and innovative culture of Sama to bring about reality, brotherhood, peace, and love. His Masnavi, his great Diwan-e-Kabir, his spirituality lessons, all gives his poetry, which evaporated him as a divine one. His birth was in the town of Balkh, now in northern Afghanistan. He was born on 30th September 1207. He spent a long time in the Anatolia, and it is known as the land of Rum, from where he got the name Rumi. His father, Bahaluddin Walid, an elegant teacher, provided him spiritual knowledge since his childhood. His spiritual teacher, or a peer or a guru, was Shamsi Tabrizi, changed his life, illuminated him as the whole world. He illuminated his inner strength and feeling to reach the ultimate goal and meet God. That was the starting journey towards Sufism. In words of Rumi, through his master, Shamsi Tabrizi, a common man turned out to be a baronial star. What king but a beggar, thee with the heart and soul? O Shamsi Tabrizi, beauty and glory of the horizon. Rumi, as R equals to renowned, U equals to universal, M equals to magnificent, I equals to illuminated. Due to political disturbances in his life, he traveled a lot, which provided him practical lessons. The world is gifted through his masterpiece, Masnavi and Diwan-e-Kabir, which is the Persian Quran, his spiritual couplets of 40,000, composed in a book form, which guided the whole humanity to move on for the advancement through brotherhood, through peace, through faith. As the whirling dance, the Sama, moved in an orbit of reunion, this ceremony is deep meditation to meet the supreme power or reunion with God. Rumi used Sufism and had deep faith in Islam. As he says, as Quran says, I'm the servant of Quran as long as I have life. I'm the dust on the path of Muhammad, the chosen one. By getting this early desire, Rumi attained a place higher than others, and his prayers reflects his inner desires. Well, coming to the research methodology, it is a theoretical framework. It will visualize the journey from the route of Maulana, his struggles to becoming Rumi. The research gap as we can see, is there is a lot of works already done on this piece of literature as a prominent figure. But certainly there are certain elements of Rumi regarding his background and journey, his struggle through the spiritual path, developing him as a prominent figure. The whole universe had witnessed this journey. As we go on to further discussion, we have to rethink about the personality of Rumi, as he was very weak, physically weak, and developed his inner strength. And in this direction, we have to find out those elements of his inner direction of making him a prominent figure and giving his energy as becoming Rumi. Conclusion. Rumi's teachings like Vasudham Kutumbam of India, this has been engraved, this shlok has been engraved in the Parliament of India. It means one family. It gives the message of brotherhood, peace, love, and hope. The same feeling of universal brotherhood made him Rumi. Only and only Rumi could do this. He created a history which always be cherished by whole humanity. These are my references. Bas Colmel, The Essential Rumi, Titik William, The Sufi Path of Love, Rumi Jalaluddin, The Quatrains of Rumi, Persian text, Rumi Jalaluddin, The Matnavi, and Maha Upanishad, Renald Nicholson. Muteshekaran in Persian. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening to me very patiently. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you very much.
I thank the chairperson for successful chairing of the session, and I also thank each and every delegate who have presented your paper very informatively and clearly. Now we'll have the interaction session. Just below this window, you'll find the tab Discussion Live in Zoom. Kindly click it. We'll move on to Zoom. There, the chairpersons will ask you the clarifications, and also the co-delegates, anything that you would like to clarify from the presenters, you may also. And we shall also be briefing you up regarding the conference information, and then we shall close this conference. That's all for now. We'll move for the interaction session by clicking the tab Discussion Live in Zoom. Thank you.